What's going on, everyone? Brandon Miranda here, Grammy-nominated music producer and audio engineer, always seeking to provide guidance and clarity for anyone wanting to make a full-time career out of their passion. Today, I have a very special breakdown of a song that I produced for singer and artist Jules Walcott. It's going to be filled with some awesome production tricks, a couple of little mixing tips, and some great direction on how to take your beats and make a full song arrangement from start to finish. So let's not waste any time and get right to it. Okay guys, so I want to not just get into the technical side of how this track was created, but I want to kind of walk you through just the major points of my thought process of how we were creating this instrumental and how we've created it into a full song. So let me go ahead and actually play kind of like the first verse and chorus of the final master of the track. Here we go.
I can't get it, I don't wanna leave. Ride or die, I'll be your Bonny if you be my Clyde. Ride or die, we'll count our crimes, no need for alibis. You know you terrify me, and you know it's what I like.
Awesome. So there's the full song. Now let's just break everything down. So the first thing I started with was this idea for a bass line. I'll go ahead and play it to you. Now, this is actually super cool. So I am not the best bass player. So actually, whenever I create bass lines, I use my guitar because something about the guitar, I know I could actually just as easily pick up a bass, but something about the guitar is very special and it causes me to play a lot more melodic than when I have a regular bass. So what I do, if I give you guys the raw sound over here, turn everything off, is a completely raw, palm muted guitar. Alright, so now how do we kind of bring that sound out? So first and foremost, I over compress the crap out of it. I'm using a DSP compressor, but you can achieve the same kind of sound. You'll see I'm probably getting, smashing the peaks, almost 20 decibels of gain reduction going on here. So that is not a technically correct thing to do from a mixing standpoint, but it is something that is a really nice kind of stylistic feel. So when I'm producing, I usually kind of put my mixing hat off to the side and I think fully creative, and sometimes they rub against each other the wrong way, but at the end of the day, when it comes to the production side and composing things, you want to lean more on the raw creative field than you want to do on your technical side. The next thing I do is I'll have an audio effect rack, and so I can actually undo this and start from scratch for y'all. So I'll find a sound shifter, and this is a function about Ableton that I absolutely love. So I can group it by hitting Command G, and then if I hit the two bars down at the bottom, it gives me the option to create another chain. And so now I have a clean chain. If I solo it, it's just the guitar. And then I have my sound shifter chain. And if I solo it, just the guitar until I pitch shift everything down a full octave, so 12 semitones. So what's so cool is now I have a clean version and a bassline version, and so if I play it, and you can kind of blend and mix and match the two. So let me go back to my original settings though. Perfect, love it. Alright, and then the next thing is just distortion, and loads of it. Super tons of attitude. I love the Devil Lock by Sound Toys. It's an awesome plugin. It is definitely really nasty, and there's a lot of noise that happens with it, but I'll show you a few tricks to be able to manage that. So here I have it super crushed, super crunched, tons of darkness. Let's hear how that sounds. Here's it off. So that's where we're getting a lot of the character. And then I'm a big fan of OTT. I used to produce a lot of electronic music, and I just love how this plugin will just pull everything out. What it's really doing is it's super duper compressing a signal, and so when you compress a signal, you're pushing down not just the volume levels of something, but you're also pushing down all of the frequencies. And when you do that, then you start to pull out actually a lot of color and saturation and things that are hidden. So another way to actually honestly interpret saturation and overdrive is by thinking of it in terms of overcompression. So I'm crushing down all of the frequencies in order to pull out those extra resonances. So here's it with it on. Here's it with it off. Another way to think about OTT, because sometimes it's just easy to throw it on and be like, cool, I'm distorting it. But when it comes to music production, I always find that if you can elevate the way you think about your tools, the more equipped you become in using them in appropriate and creative ways. Think of OTT as a multi-band compressor. You have high, mids, lows right here. And then everything's getting crushed depending upon what's going into it. But what's super cool is now I have these gains of my high, mids, and lows where I'm able to raise the overall volume of it. So think of it basically in two things. Multi-band compression, that's over-compressing, within 3 bands that I can use to boost and make up that gain for those 3 bands. Right? I can get more high end, more mid-range. And usually what I do to make a very distorted signal sound punchier is I'll tighten down the low end and I'll boost the high end. And I'm never really going to 100% depth, it's a little bit too much. It starts to eat away from the bass. I find like right around 23% helps me keep a nice stable signal. Okay, and then finally I'm actually using LFO tool to give it some more groove. Now I have a super cool trick with the way I apply LFO tool to my basses. Check this out. What I love to do is I'll activate the split mode and then I keep it in this low frequency mode. So basically what happens is wherever I dial it in here on the frequency knob, LFO tool is only going to duck down those frequencies going below it. Here's how that sounds. If I turn split off, it's going to duck down all of the volume. And that's just sounding too much of like a side chain to my ears right now. I only want this duck to happen so I have space for the kick, and I only really need to duck down those frequencies below 134 hertz. So that's my solution for that right there. And it also makes the bass feel much more rhythmic. And that was one thing that I noticed when I added all the color and added all the distortion, all that saturation. I started to smear the groove of the bass, and throwing the LFO tool at the end of this chain was able to pull that out, right? All right, cool. So then the next section of creating the song. So I had a drum loop that I pulled from an old song I'd produced in a while. I'm all about recycling your tools. If you've already made great loops, if you already make great chord progressions or guitars, and especially drums, then use that to your advantage. I always go back after songs that I make and produce that I love, and I export those things because then I can just throw them into my next session and save myself tons of time. And that's exactly what we had happen over here. So here's a loop. And what I did is I did 2 layers of the loop, so you can hear the top layer. And all I did was just add some R bass to that to get some more low end over there. So without the R bass, it's going to sound softer on the low end. And with it on, we're getting some of those nice 80 hertz frequency. Then my top loop, a brighter version of that loop. So then when I combine these two together, and that's all I needed to do. The next thing, 2 important things though to make this song unique that I knew it needed to happen, because if I was just playing against the bass line and the drums, all we're getting is rock music, but I wanted to make a pop record. So for myself, the things I love to do to take a song out of the genre and just make it sound more modernized is vocal chops. There's something about chopping a vocal up in the right way and placing it in the right spot of an instrumental that just modernizes a song. So I'm very big on taking old formats, rock, hip-hop, R&B, but then finding that 1% that's going to tweak it to make it sound more palatable for commercial music today. And so the 2 vocal chops I lean on was this one little cut that I had from, again, an old song. And I love that rhythm that I cut. What I ended up doing was just taking this one long one here and then moving it over and chopping it in half. So it became more rhythmic, right? And then the best one over here is I actually literally gave Jules my iPhone and I turned on voice memos and I was like, here, I'm gonna play the beat into your headphones. I want you to sing whatever you wanna sing into the voice memos, and then I'm gonna take that, airdrop it, and put it into the session. And You end up doing a ton of cleaning, ton of chopping, lots of warping and sampling and everything, but here's the final product of that sound. And that really became the melodic hook. As soon as I put that in there, all of us in the studio were like, boom, we've got it, let's start writing the song. Now let me break down how that sound was created. So if I turn all my processing off, boom, you get it, you hear it. You hear the background noise, you hear kind of the over compression that you get when you record into voice memos. And then to make it more stylistic, I have a little telephone effect with the EQ. Throwing on autotune to make sure it fits in the key of the song. Love it. And then one of my favorite tools ever, Alter Boy. So I pitched everything up by a full octave. So we'll just hear that first. And that's from that moment. Using Alter Boy is one of my favorite tools because that's that one moment where it takes something from sounding just like a vocal into sounding like a synth or something ethereal. I love the texture that you get with the format, so I have a pretty consistent habit where I turn everything down, usually about like 3. And here's before. And here's after. And then if you watched any of my previous videos before, I am a huge fan of CLA vocals, and here's my settings for that. I just wanted to feel, again, with the wall or the compression lane over here, it's going to make it a little bit more distorted, and then some reverb, and definitely some stereo spread to get that wide feeling. I'll turn everything off and then turn them back on so you get a feel for it yourself. And here's it on. Boom, again, that same facet of over compression resulting in some nice distortion and coloration. My reverb, slap delay. Sometimes it's hard to hear the difference, so I'll play just a slap. So you can hear it's just like a quick, like bum, 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 like a slapback delay. And then my spreader to make everything nice and wide. Boom, and there we go. So those are the 3 main components that really this record is built on. Now, some extra just sauce stuff to kind of brighten things or fill it out. So let me just play everything in solo with that. Those 3 main components, my drums, the vocal chop, and the bass line. Oh guys, and then I almost forgot. I have a massive reverb on my vocal chop after the CLA vocals. And then to make it a little bit more rhythmic, I'm using tremolator. So I'm using it in about 50%, and what this does is it just kind of adds a pump. Very similar to LFO tool, but it has a slightly different feel and slightly different texture. And an important thing about music production is knowing that there are synonymous plugins all over the place. There's so many reverbs, there's so many tremolators, there's so many compressors, but the more you can master the nuances about how each one varies just slightly in its tone, the better you'll understand your tool set, and the more you'll be able to empower yourself to make much more refined sonic decisions. Let's hear this on. If I turn it all the way up, you'll definitely be able to hear that pump. And it just makes everything a little bit more rhythmic and, again, adds for a much more unique texture. So here's it totally off. And then here's it on again. Amazing. Okay, so in this song, those are the main components that really we just needed to get the record moving. And honestly, in some essences, we could have been done with that. Yeah, so let me just play those things to you in solo. So I'm soloing my vocal chops, my main guitar, and my drum loop. Amazing. So that's it. Technically, that's really all that you need, and that was more than enough. As soon as we got to that point, Jules was in the booth writing down her lyrics, preparing her melodies and everything, and it's really actually astonishing with how adding a vocal to an instrumental really completes the song. A lot of times, if you actually go back and listen to instrumentals of big famous pop songs, you'll be almost kind of disappointed with how simple that instrumental actually sounds. So I say this to encourage everyone to keep your productions simple, and especially if you're working with vocalists, keep them so simple, because that vocal and that vocal production is really what's going to tie off that whole record. But before I end there, let me go ahead and just share with you some of the extra layers and ear candies I did to help bring some more life into this instrumental. So I did know I needed some rhythm guitars, so we'll play those back to y'all. So very simple. I don't even have most of the processing on. I literally just recorded guitar straight in, applied some Devon lock. Something that I like to do with rhythm guitars, old school method, is I'll play 2 layers of the same thing. So layer 1, layer 2, and then I have one pan hard left and one pan hard right. And then if I scroll down to the very bottom, I made some pads. We'll hear those. And really what those pads are is the chords. I played them down on the keyboard, and really these pads are actually kind of breaking my own rules, and I got a loop from Splice for those pads. Usually I like to play things out because I have more control, but I don't know what exactly happened during the session, but I think we were scrolling through sounds and we found this, and it happened to match the right chord progression. Probably had to chop it up to fit the order, but yeah, those are just to add a little bit more breadth and width to the overall track. And again, I do multiple layers, so here's our first layer pad. Looks like I have a little bit of serum effect, so a chorus effect and some compression. Again, actually, if you don't use serum effects, it's awesome. And there's one cool function about the compressor. If I hit multiband, it actually starts to behave the same way as OTT. They're both owned by the same company. Love it. And then my next layer, what it looks like, I probably freeze and flatten this guy, dropped it down, and pitch it up by an octave. So now we get this nice, really full pad sound. All right, bet. So now let's talk about the final and one of the most important components about putting together an instrumental, is that arrangement. So when I'm arranging a song, usually I kind of know by my instincts, by listening to a lot of music, where things need to shift and change. But if you get stuck, one of the best and easiest ways, and it's exactly what I did over here, is I'll actually just take my chorus and I'll duplicate it. Boom, 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 boom. And I'll start going through the beat and removing things in order to make it feel like this left-right motion. So let me undo all that real quick, and we can show you what happened over here. So I did exactly that, copy-pasted over here to my little intro, and I actually even had an intro to my intro where I just have some vinyl crackle, and then it'll swell in. Let's hear that. I also then removed the second drum layer, so now we have a thinner sounding drum loop. And check this out, if you look at the vocal chops, if I try to copy paste these or line them up, most of it is chopped out. And so I intentionally removed a ton of layers. We have no bass, we have no guitars, we have nothing going on in that first verse except for our pads and our chords, and a redacted version of a vocal chop. I knew this because what I want is to build familiarity with that chop. I want to build familiarity with that hook and that feel, but I don't want to give everything all away at once. So I'm preparing the listener, but I'm not oversaturating them, because then once this chorus hits, then you're going to hear the whole version of what was kind of mysteriously building up throughout the song. So I love to kind of break things up into verse and a pre-chorus, and typically in pop music I'll do an 8 to 16 for my first verse, and then I'll do an 8 for my pre. That's not a hard and fast rule. That's just something that my taste kind of gravitate towards, and something I've noticed a lot of other songwriters appreciate. But you literally, at the end of the day, you can do whatever you want with this. But now let's go ahead and listen to the pre. Boom. So let's just talk about that right there. Again, let's go first with our vocal chops, redacted. And I have a pitch shifted version of it down right here. Again, I don't want to give away the whole thing. I just want to give little snippets of that chop, building suspense for then when we get to our final loop. Now, we change the drum progression. I don't change drums all of the time. It really depends on what the song calls for in the moment. But we agreed when in the studio, there needs to be a shift, especially with such a repetitive loop like this one. It's a little much. And so going to the halftime, we all knew this is the right focus and feel. And look, it's only 1, 2, 3 elements, but it just has a nice shift. Everything's simple, but everything's tasteful. And probably one of my favorite parts about this transition is then we finally give away at least a snippet, not all of it, of that bass line. So then we start to know where we're going, and we also start to give the listener anticipation about what's going to happen once that chorus hits. Now, we did hear a little tape stop, so let's find that guy over here. Oh yeah, so this is what I do, especially in pre-choruses, to give it the balance of like having a fill. I won't do a full perfect drum loop. I'll actually, at those last 4 measures, create a particular moment. And so what I did is I brought in a little redacted version of those drums. Boom. And then it looks like our pads right here are doing a tape stop. And so the way I do tape stops in Ableton is, let's see, I'll kind of bring this out and I'll do it from scratch. I chop that section, so I want the tape stop going from beats 1, 2, and then stopping at beat 3. So then we give a moment for the singer to have like some space. And then in complex mode, otherwise it's not going to work, I go to my envelopes, I go to my clip, and then I change my transposition, and then I'll just transpose it down, usually going to about -12. And I'll do that on both of them. And then let's just make sure that's starting where at the same time. Boom. Easy. Simple. I love that kind of effect. It also kind of just leads the ear and forces the listener into that last moment of silence. And listen, silence before a drop of a record is a very, very powerful tool. So go ahead and give that listen. There you go. Simple as that. Now, let's talk about second verse. So second verses, I usually like to keep the drums going. In this second verse, we did a little bit of a unique turn, and we actually kept those halftime drums going, but it was a little bit more of an evolved one. Now, one thing for certain is that in the second verse, it's very important to keep the motion going in the record, right? If you have too much of a jolt downwards, it'll cause a listener to get bored. A powerful test you can do in knowing if your music is ready or not to be released is actually taking your record and playing it to friends or family that are not musical at all, guys that don't know anything about music. So your moms, your grandparents, if they don't happen to be musicians, they're the perfect audience for this exercise. Play it to them and definitely pay attention to their body language, especially when the second chorus comes. If you start to notice them get distracted, pull out the phone, start texting, you know you have a little bit of an energy shift that needs to be applied to your record. And so we kind of anticipated this, and so what we did is while we went to the halftime drums, we kept that bass line in. And then also, I love to do little cuts in that bass line and build up into it. And then honestly, the rest of it is a straight up copy paste job. So you can hear rising, so I just cut out actually the tape stop over there and deleted it, so we have a little bit of a variance from our first pre to our second pre, but that's really it. And then boom, like I said, copy paste job, because at the end of the day, really what's going to carry that motion of left to right and feeling like a song truly is that vocal. If you're making instrumental music, then it's going to be your melody and the way you reformat that melody. But the base of your instrumentals, your drums, your rhythm instruments, your guitars, your synths, your keys, a lot of times it's going to be very simple, copy, paste, see if you can pitch shift something down for a slight variation, or at the end of the day, the easiest thing you can do is start to remove things. So thank you guys for your support. Please, if this video helped you, like, comment, and let me know what other videos and topics I can discuss with you guys. And of course, I always invite you to subscribe so you can get some more helpful tricks, tools, and extra clarity for your music careers. Again, Brandon Miranda, and we're out.